Okay, it's the end of the session. I am here with Belle and Jazz, and they're behind the camera actually. And it might be easier for you just to hold it on your thigh.
Yeah.
It's just for you guys. And so basically, they're really, really, really attached to Grandma. I'm going to refer to her as. And basically, they were adopted at 7 weeks, which is a little bit too young. You really want to get a puppy at 8 weeks. That's the perfect time to get a puppy, and they lose a lot of social experience if you get them early. Now they are siblings, and that is also a problem with you have dogs because sibling rivalry, and that's absolutely the case going here. Jazz dominates, and Belle is just I don't know how I think she knows how to live anymore, and so she just is I think in fear. She's not attacking her, but Jazz is just over the last 7 years, about 7 years old, has just always gotten in between and just is kind of, and it's dog's natural inclination to try to get as much as they can. Our job as parents and guardians is to try to kind of moderate that. Now, so I'm going to kind of go over some of the things we went over here, a couple of housekeeping things. Anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're reinforcing. So if you pet a fearful dog, you will make it more fearful. Anxious, more anxious. Aggressive, more aggressive. Excited is probably one of the most common ones. So if your dog is jumping up on you and you pet it, you're saying, yes, I'm petting you for jumping up on me. Now, also, it also amplifies unbalanced states of mind like fear, stress, anxiety. So if we have a dog that's fearful, we can lay our hand on them, and that's comforting. But as soon as we pet, we'll make it slightly worse each time. Now, dogs learn through repetition, consistency, and good timing. You have 3 seconds to correct or reward the dog for them to have the ability to make the connection, but it has to be repeated consistently enough times before they can actually connect those dots. Now, also for dogs, anything the dog is doing that we don't disagree with is like giving our seal of approval. So in a very real way, not saying no is akin to saying yes. And this is important based on how dogs learn, because dogs go through life probing, waiting for you to say that's the line and that's the limit, and then I'm going to circle back around and try it again and see if you're consistent. And again, and after you're consistent a certain number of times, I'm like, that's a boundary. That's how we establish invisible boundaries and teach dogs to move away and things along those lines. So it's inconsistency is one of the worst things that we do that confuses dogs. Also remember that rules are not mean, and enforcing rules is not, or rules are not negative, and enforcing rules is not mean. Let me see. Before we get into it, I'm going to kind of go over a couple of things. So one of the things is Jazz likes to sit. If I'm Grandma, Jazz likes to sit here and keep Belle on this side. So we came up with a watch for this. We call this bossy pants. So if somebody's in the room and notices that Jazz is in between Belle and Grandma, we're going to say, we would tell that person, whoever's going to enforce it, bossy pants. This would be anybody but Grandma, because Grandma gets up, the dogs are probably going to move with her. So the person would get up and walk towards Jazz and keep on walking towards Jazz and kind of bump into Jazz if she stays there. Now remember, you can lightly, again, we don't want to cause any harm, but if she refuses to move, you can just put your foot on her paw and start pressing down. That pressure is going to cause her to pull her paw up. You go to the second paw, she'll get up and eventually walk away. Now your authority goes whatever direction your hips and shoulders are pointing. So make sure you're pointing that at the dog and walking towards Jazz. And if I'm trying to walk her this way and there's a little gap here, I want to use this wall to my advantage. So I kind of square up, leave just not, don't go all the way to the wall, but you get as close as you can so she can't scoot around. She kept on trying to go around the guardian. So, and she doesn't know exactly what it is. So we're going to move her away. Now we can also do other things. We also went over how to teach the dog to go to a dog bed. We could use that, tell the dog to go to the dog bed. That would be another alternative way, and that's even less confrontation. We could also tell the dog to leave the room. Remember, to leave the room, and this is something I'd like you all to do, is each person gets a bag of treats or kibble or whatever it is that they'll take, and with one dog separately, the other dog's maybe on a walk or somewhere else, we go to the doorway, we show the dog I have a treat. When we're in the room, we throw the treat just about 3 feet outside the room, outside the doorway. The dog runs out and gets it. We say the word out. The dog comes back, we throw it again and say out. Then we go to the next doorway. There's a dining room table, and there's a carpet around the dining room table. I would go on the carpet, have the dog walk off this way, this way. If this is the dining room table, I would kind of have the dog go this way, this way, this way, if this is the carpet. And so the dog gets practice moving every direction away from the table. You can also do this with the kitchen, all the bedrooms, all the rooms of the house. And then I would also do this wherever the young one eats at. So you can tell him to out. Or her, either one of them, the girls to out. Now, once I've done all of the doorways, all the portals in the room, then I would go back, and I wouldn't probably do this for a dinner table, but I would throw one treat in this room, call it, media. Throw one in the kitchen and call it kitchen. I only do one in. Most of it is we're going to tell the dog to out. Now, let's say that we tell Jazz to go to Hawaii, which is the dog bed. And she goes over there and then she comes back and she gets in between Belle and Grandma again. I might say out, I might move her, or I might tell her the dog bed or whatever it is. But after the second time, if she does it a third time, then I would say out and she has to leave the room. Now, first I would make them leave the room, and as soon as she leaves on her own, if I have to escort her, then she's going to have to stay out for a period of time. But if I can say out and she leaves, she can just walk out and turn around and come right back in, as long as she doesn't go in between. But remember, when she goes in between, it's not her trying to be a jerk. She's just used to it. She just wants as much grandma's attention for herself as possible. And it's our job to say, look, you have to share. And so now if I have to escort her, like I said, then she would have to stay out for a period of time, usually until they lay down and they kind of are mellow. And if they're whining and whimpering, the clock doesn't even start until you stop the whining and whimpering. Now we have 2 doors in this room, so you can actually close one of the doors and make it easier if she's trying to defeat you by getting around you. But we have to let the dog know. Remember, one of the dirty secrets of dog behavior, you have to always outlast the dog. So every time we let the dog win, she's going to do it more and more in the future. So what we're just going to say is, for no longer are you allowed to get in between Belle and Grandma. And if you do, you're going to have to go to the dog bed. And if you do it a second time, you have to leave the room temporarily. If you do it a third time, you have to stay out of the room. And so we're not punishing. I guess it's a consequence. I guess you could look at it as a punishment somewhat, but it's a very limited one. All right, and we have to do that because Bella's spirit is just it's hanging by a thread. And so now the dogs need some exercise, but because they pull so much on the leash, in the video above, we went over a loose leash walking technique, and I'm going to just leave it to that. I want you to watch that video, and I'd like you to walk them frequently. Now, when they come up and they're boisterous, or if you're going to have guests coming by, or somebody's going to come and visit, or whatever it is, we set the dogs up for success by getting them some exercise. So one of the things I'd like the guardians to do, and they can probably order this today when I leave the session on Amazon, is go and get a treat and train. It's treat, the letter N, train. It's a device that allows you to treat your dog remote control. So we have a big house here, but we don't have a huge yard. What I'd like the guardian to do is put the treat and train. At first, you're just going to put it down on the ground, and I would have just with Jazz at first. And then basically all you're going to do is you're going to press the button. Now there's a tone. You can turn the tone on or off, or make it how louder as you want to do it. What I'd first do is I would just put the machine down, and I'd take one of these treats and I'd throw the treat in the little tray and let Jazz go get it. And do that a couple times and keep on doing that until she's going up there without any hesitation, licking it up and nudging it. The next thing what I would do, because the dogs both have I'm pretty sure they have cortisol in their blood. So the next thing I would do is I'd use a little counter conditioning. What I would do is I would have the machine in another room, and it makes a sort of sound. I would turn the beep off, or you can have the beep on too, but I would have it like a far away where you can hear it, but it's not so close that it's going to cause the dog to get skittish. And then what I would do is I would throw the treat in, I would, let me think how I want to do this. I would press the button, and you hear the dong and and then I give the dog the treat. And I do that about 5 times. Now, if she won't take the treat and gets skittish, move the device further away. What we want to do is we want to desensitize and help her be comfortable with the sound and the tone. So at first she got used to going to the machine and good things happen, but it wasn't moving. Now the machine is making the sounds, but it's far away, so she doesn't see it's coming from the machine. She doesn't know what the sound is coming from, but she hears the sound, and then she gets a treat. So after doing this, maybe you do this like 10 treats, and then wait a little bit. Maybe one day is probably enough to do this. And then wait and go to a different room and have, again, the machine far away, and you press the button, and then she gets a treat. And then the next day, I would actually put the machine down and then press the button. And, before I put it down, I'd put a treat in there, let her go get it, walk away, do that 2 or 3 times. And then what I would do is I would press the button. And then she'll hear it, and by this point, she should be comfortable enough. And she goes over there. Don't point it out. Let her go over there. When she does and licks the treat up, then you can assign a command word, but the tone is probably going to be sufficient. You won't need to. So we want to, and this is going to be harder for Belle than it is for Jazz. These would be nice things to do after they've been exercised, as long as they're not over-exercised. So the idea is now we can use this treat and train. Once it's a positive association, we could be on the far side of the house, put the treat and train way on the other side of the house. And then now at first I would, let me back up. So at first what I would do is I would have the treat and train, maybe if this is the hallway here, I'd be here with the dog and put the treat and train here, maybe 10 feet apart. Press the button, the dog walks 3 feet over, gets the treat, and then comes back, and then comes to you, and then you give it a treat and say, come. or here, whatever your word is. And do that a couple times, and then have the distance increase. Or maybe just put the treat tray at the end of the hallway and then you just walk away. I guess it'd be an easier way to do it. And so the idea is now we're training the dog to go further and further away from me to get that treat because I'm moving further away, but the treat tray stays the same location. Eventually I get way to the other side of the house and I press the button and they hear that beep and they'll just skedaddle over there, gets the treat, and then you say here and the dog comes back to you and you give a treat. So now we're incorporating some exercise and helping the dog practice a good recall command. And so remember when the dog comes up and is re-sitting to ask for attention, or if they're naughty, or if you're having people come over, we want to exercise them. Before a walk, exercising the dog before a walk produces a much better walk. So that might be not a bad thing to do as well. So exercise for dogs is best done every 2 to 4 hours throughout the day. They're in their prime. They're 6 or 7. They're 7 years old. That's really in their prime for dogs. And so they don't need a ton of exercise. The first time you do it, I would do it with an empty stomach. Dog's stomach's not attached to anything, so we don't want them running around with a full stomach. Walking is okay, but so when you do these things, exercise first, then feed the dogs after. So the dog's a nuisance. You should either do the Omega Paw treat ball, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, or do some what I call long distance recalls using the treat and train. And you can use just the kibble. It should spit 2 pieces of kibble out, and they have little trays. You can fix it and message me if you have any questions with it. Okay, other things we can do for walking. Jazz is interested in chasing a laser. Now, she's starting to get more and more animated as we do. We only did it for about a minute. If she starts breathing heavy, drooling, or whining or whimpering, don't do it with her. It's not healthy. When you're doing it, make sure you're doing very gradual movements. Don't jerk it here or there because they'll stop chasing it. And if they ever look at you, make sure you stop when they look at you, so that otherwise they'll see the laser comes through the pen and they'll stop looking at the floor. Okay, so I'd also like the Guardian to get a snuffle mat. I'd like to get 2. Right now, I think it'll probably be, at first, it'll be just Jazz, but eventually it'd be nice if Belle could eat out of that too. So you lay it down on the ground and you dump the dry kibble on it and work it in there. And then the dog's got to use his nose to find the piece of kibble, move the little tassel, lick it up, and then repeat the process over and over. This makes feeding like a walk. So if we feed him twice a day out of snuffle mats, for Jazz, that's 2 extra walks that we've filtered in. We do that. We also have the long distance treat and train. Maybe that we do that 2 or 3 times a day. Excuse me. Another one that you can do that we didn't talk about, like Marco Rubio, is scent games. A dog's nose controls 60% of their brain, and it's very draining for them to sniff. So what it is you can just hide treats. If this is the leg of the couch, maybe hide a treat around here. And the high-value trainer chicken liver treats that I use have a strong scent. And then every time Jazz licks up the treat, we call it search, hunt, find. And so now the dog has, search. Oh, there's 5 treats around. I can go find the treats. I'm using my nose to find them. That's physically draining, and it gives the dog something to do as well. Now, again, for all these things, we'd like to do them with both dogs, but you'd probably be able to do it with Jazz faster than with Belle. And when Belle's doing it first, Jazz should be put away. Jazz will try to intimidate her, not in a really egregious way. Jazz is going to try to take everything she can get, so we're going to have to remove her from the equation. Speaking of which, I would like Grandma to spend some time with Belle, independent of Jazz, every day, maybe twice a day. Just a special time, and not always in the bedroom, because the bedroom is like the special place they go. I'd like you to spend time in every room on the dog bed. And just call Belle over, and if she's nervous, just lay your hand on her, and I would like you to read to her. Just get a magazine or a newspaper or a book and just spend 5 minutes reading to her and talk to her in a nice, soothing tone. Look at her, say her name. And if your tail's not tucked and she's relaxed, then you can pet her a little bit if she's doing it. But I want you to build in some time, just the 2 of you. And when this is going on, Jazz is somewhere else, preferably not barking because that will stress Belle out. Also, I'd like them to spend some time outside of the bedroom in different parts of the house. And Jazz likes to be outside, or does not like to be outside alone. And so what I would do is I'd put Jazz outside, and then I would have Grandma sitting inside and wait for Jazz to sit or lie down. And as soon as she sits or lies down, then go open the door and let her in. Then after a while, after she starts sitting and lying down faster and faster, then after she sits, we maybe wait 5 seconds before we let her back in. Then 10 seconds, and then 20. And we can also help Jazz want to go out and explore things by taking a little shredded cheese. So you might alternate between the two of these. So maybe you just take the shredded cheese and first just put it on the deck and just do a kind of not a huge trail, but so she goes over and licks up this treat. And then maybe at the end there's a bully stick or something like that there. So we're kind of creating a treasure trail, getting her using her nose and getting her moving around outside rather than just pining, I want to come inside. And at first she might only go a foot away from the trail, then 2 feet, and eventually more and more and more. But we'd like her to practice being alone outside, away from grandma, because right now she wants to be near grandma. She also wants to block Belle from being towards grandma. So it'd be beneficial to boost her confidence and also good practice, and it allows grandma eventually to have some time with Belle. And again, you can spend time with Jazz, but I don't think you have to do it like you do with Belle, where I'd like you to read. And something that you could do is the Omega Paw Treat Ball. Something else you can do for exercise, Omega Paw Treat Ball, and get the large one. So put some of her kibble in it and put her in the bedroom and let her nudge it around, and then you spend some time with Belle. And so that way, Jazz is occupied. That is going to be a draining exercise for her, energy draining, and also boost her self-esteem and confidence. And then you get to spend some time. And I'm saying at least twice a day, but doing it more often than that is better. Because we just want Belle to start feeling like she can be with grandma herself, but doing it different parts of the house and ever get practice comfortable in different parts of the house. Dogs don't generalize well. They have to do things in a whole lot of different areas to have something down. Okay, so other things that you could do for exercise would be walking. Now, the walking video above is going to explain all that stuff. But remember, when they're walking, sniffing burns more energy than the locomotion of walking. So we want them to sniff. And I think for your dogs, at first, you might actually have to have somebody go out there with some shredded cheese, grab a bag, and just kind of sprinkle some shredded cheese in people's lawns. And then kind of lead the dog there and kind of stay there and wait for the dog to kind of get into it. And after a while, the dog will start like looking for the shredded cheese that's all around. Again, the best place to start doing is either in your backyard yourself on the deck, or you can do a little bit inside, just getting them used to it first. We get them used to the easier version, then we gradually make it more and more challenging. And eventually they're on walks and they're sniffing everything, as long as it's safe to do so. And that's healthy. Dogs should be meeting by scent, not by sight. These dogs definitely meet by sight. And they should be walked separately. I'd like to see them walked at least once a day separately. And Jazz's walk might be a little bit longer. And again, if Jazz is boisterous, do the treat and train long distance recalls a little bit first. And for the treat and train for the long distance recalls, the first time I would do it with an empty stomach, and I want to see what each dog's maximum number is. So once they're comfortable with the machine, the way I described earlier, then basically stand the opposite side of the house, press the button, the dog runs there and gets it. And then when it comes back to you, give it and say come or recall, and count each trip back and forth 1. And keep doing it with an empty stomach until Jazz is like, you're crazy. I've done that 97 times. I'm not doing that anymore. We need to know what that maximum number is. And it probably will be close to that 90. It might be over 100. But like 5 minutes of doing that is going to be like, because she's running, that'll be like a 20-minute walk. And so we want to exercise about 50 to 75% of that maximum number, but maybe before a walk, we do 4 minutes of that. Give her 10 minutes to recover, then we take her for a walk. So this way we set her up for success by taking that high level of exercise out or energy out of her, and then the technique that we cover above should help her learn not to pull or lunge on the leash. Now anybody can walk them, and now they're sniffing on walks the way they should, and that sniffing is very draining for energy. So these dogs, the walks, I'd like to say is mandatory, if I could set a mandatory every day, because these dogs they need more external stimulation, and that's really going to help them. Also, I'd love to see if you could, if there are other dogs, if they get along with other dogs. I don't know if they do, but especially Belle, I'd like to get her playing or going walks with other dogs. If she meets some other dogs that are friendly, and make sure they are friendly. So if anybody has a dog that's a little bit boisterous, say, look, she has been really beat down for a long time. We need just super happy. If I had you in Omaha, I would have you bring Belle to my puppy class. We bring adult dogs like this around 7-8-week-old puppies, and the puppies are not intimidated, and they're just super wiggly, and then it helps the dog build up some self-esteem and confidence. So you see a neighbor who has a little bit of an older dog or a very nice dog, ask them, hey, is your dog gentle? We occasionally have dogs in our puppy classes that are just like these helper dogs. They're really engaging, but in a non-threatening way, and they help the dog learn to be a dog again. So I would really like to see you find 1 or 2 or 3 friends for Bella to have some time together. Maybe she goes over to their house and they spend some time running around in the house in the backyard, and she gets away from Jazz. Not that Jazz is being a jerk about it. Jazz is just a sibling rivalry. So we need her to have these positive experiences, and that will help her develop more confidence and social skills, which will actually help her with Jazz. Okay, so exercise, like I said, is multiple times a day, and if the dogs are naughty, probably need exercise. If they're boisterous, ask how long it's been. If it's been longer than an hour, it probably needs some exercise. And then the Omega Paw treat ball, like I said, something you can use for Jazz and eventually, hopefully, for Bella. And that gives them something to do. Just make sure they don't have that together, because I could see that become a resource sort of thing where it creates a problem. All right, we also talked about rules. The dogs don't have any rules. So one of the rules is they can't get in the bed, but right now Jazz gets up there first. I would say the first rule is they're not allowed to be on the furniture, with the exception of the bed, but the bed has a special circumstances to it. So I would get the X mats for here, and at the same time practice throwing the treats on the dog bed. And that would be, again, something that you would do independent with Jazz. So maybe Jazz is out practicing the circle technique for walking, and then Grandma's over there and throwing the treats over there onto the dog bed, and Belle goes and licks them up, and we came up with a different word. And I would maybe condition Belle to go to what did you say? Kona. And then Jazz goes to Hawaii, so that way of their own. And also for feeding, getting back to, well, I guess this is the rules part. I'll get to feeding in a sec. So basically, not allowed the furniture for at least 90 days, if not longer. And I'd say probably permanently, because right now Jazz is up here and Belle doesn't get up here, and it creates an imbalance. And for the bed, what I would say is when we go to bed, Grandma's going to go get a giant sheet cover, put just a sheet, lay it down in the bed, and then she gets to the bed and she gets the sheet cover and she gets comfortable however she wants. And then when she's ready, she invites Bella, and Belle gets to come up first, and we see where Belle wants to go. Belle might go to the same place, and you might actually want to do this the first time. Maybe have somebody walking Jazz. So just Belle gets up there, and maybe she goes to the same place, and then you try hold her a treat and ask her to come here. She probably is going to go to the same place. She's in the habit of doing it. But we'd like Belle to always be the first dog that gets called on in the bed. And then Jazz goes somewhere else on the bed. And if Jazz tries to get in between Belle and Grandma, Jazz has to get down. She loses that privilege. And so that way the bed becomes there's a little bit of structure to the getting into the bed. Okay, so for feeding, feeding is the most important activity for dogs. So what I would do is when you're feeding them, I would make sure that Grandma or whoever the handler is eating something in 5 or more bites first. I usually like to put the bowls of food on the floor down. I don't let them in the area. Then that they're practicing a little self-restraint. Then I eat 5 bites of a chip or cracker or whatever it is. When I get done, then I would invite Jazz to come and eat, because Belle just won't eat. I would normally try to feed Belle first. I just don't think she will. And Jazz should eat out of that snuffle mat. It'll take a little bit longer, but that's, again, equivalent to a walk. So we'll trade that. When she gets done, she has to leave the area completely so Belle can't see or hear her, because I think she'll just stare at Belle and try to intimidate. And I'd like Grandma to get down and start for a week, feed Belle by hand. Just a small scoop, let her have it. And remember, I want to use that passive training, come up with a funny command word to eat. Chimichanga or fajitas or tacos or whatever you want. And so she's eating at first for about a week out of the hand until she's eating pretty good out of the hand. And then you can just start taking a handful and putting it in her bowl. And let her lick that. Then take another handful, put it in the bowl. Or if you want to do that right away, maybe you do it a handful over the bowl. And she's eating, the first week you're just doing it regular, and then the second one you're doing it, but she's leaning towards her bowl and your hand is resting in the bowl and she's licking off your hand. And then after a while you do that and she licks a little bit off your hand, and then you dump the rest of it in the bowl and you pull your hand away and she's eating out of the bowl. And eventually it gets to the point where she's eating there. Now it'd be nice to get her to eat out of a snuffle mat, and it is pretty easy. I think you'll be able to do that, but we want Grandma to really help build her confidence. Right now she takes her a long time to eat because her self-esteem is so low. So this is a great way to build that self-confidence, because Grandma's touching it, and I like to get to lick Grandma's hand every time I do this. It feels good to me. But eventually we'd like to get her feeding out of a snuffle mat, because that'll boost her self-esteem and confidence. Another rule was they shouldn't be allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food. Just create a line from the counter between the work island and the counter. Not allowed to be there. It's usually like an L shape. When we're preparing food, the rest of the time you can come or go. And then When we're eating, the dog should not be within 7 feet of it when we're eating. When the child is eating, again, create that boundary. And some people will actually put down painter's tape on the floor so you see exactly where the line is. And the dog's not allowed to cross that line. If they do, you stand up and march towards them until they vacate the line. So if I march towards Jazz, and let's say I'm 10 feet away and I march 3 feet and she vacates the line, I stop there. I don't have to go over the edge. But if she stays there, I will go up and I'll run into her if I have to. And the suddenness, don't slow down and stop before you get to her. The suddenness will make her move further back. And make sure you keep your hips pointed towards her. Now, once you get to the line, then you stop, pause for 1 second, wait for the dog to stop moving. When the dog stops moving, take a step backwards. Left foot, right foot, pause. That was actually right, left. But pause between steps. Remember, if you turn around, your authority's going away. They'll come right behind you. When your dogs communicate with each other through movement, they do a stop between each movement. So step, step, pause. As long as the dog stays stationary, step, step, pause. If I step back, if this is the line, and I step back and the dog comes forward, I rush forward is my way of saying no, I wouldn't do the pause. And you keep going back and forth until the dog doesn't cross that line. That's how you establish a visible boundary. And if you forget how to do that, go to doggoneproblems.com, click on where it says dog training tips. In the search box, type in the word invisible or kitchen, and I have videos that explain how to do that. Okay, another rule is they have to sit at the door. I go to the door and I say sit once. Remember, the more you say it, the less you mean it. Say sit once. If she doesn't sit within 3 seconds, sit down nearby, wait 1 minute, and then I go back to the dog and tell her to sit. If she doesn't sit this time, I'll walk away for 2 minutes while I'm seated. Make sure you sit down. Standing looks like you're waiting for the dog. Next time I'm away 4 minutes, 8 minutes, 16 minutes. I keep double length of time. So it's about to be a flop, Grandma. So right there, pet her and say flop. That's passive training, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And eventually I would do it at the door to the bedroom. I would do it any doorway in the house, especially outside. And outside would be powerful, especially for Jazz. So you go outside and tell her to sit. If she doesn't sit, then you sit down and you sit nearby. She can see you through the window, but she can't come in. If she pounds or whimpers or jumps or barks, none of that. Don't even look at her. Remember, good attention, bad attention, same thing. So after doing that, then she'll start sitting at the door saying, please, can I come inside? Then another video that you can do, because this is a problem that we didn't get to today, but it's once you get the dog to sit, then you can go to my where it says dog training tips on my website and click on wait at, or search for wait at door. And I have a video where you teach the dog to wait for you to open the door wide, and then you go through and then you call the dogs after. Because that's going to be eventually a problem because they get excited. And also remember, when they're excited, don't say it's okay or good girl or any of those mantras, and don't talk to them excitedly, because that's when they make more mistakes. Excited is an unbalanced state of mind. The reason is because when the dogs are excited, they're out of breath and their mouth is open. And that looks like a smile to us. So you want to go for a walk? Let's go for a walk. And we wonder why they can't listen. They're just too out of sync. Okay, so those are rules. There are probably other rules they can also incorporate, but just make sure whoever's feeding them is eating something first. And then again, Jazz eats, and when Jazz is done, she walks away. And I would pick up the snuffle mat. You can wash them in your washer and dryer. And then the Omega Paw treat ball, once it's empty, make sure you take it away. A lot of dogs will tear it open to see why it stopped paying off treats. You have to buy another one. So usually my dog can't get the last one, so I have to shake the last 1 or 2 pieces out, give it to the dog, and then I put it up on the shelf. And if the dog's a nuisance, that would be a good thing to do to distract the dog. Now, when you have guests come over, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to find a dog walker. I think it would be really, really beneficial. And getting them walks on a regular basis. Again, they need that stimulation. And this is somebody that's outside the house that is familiar with dogs. Just make sure that you tell them, under no circumstances can you use a prong collar or a shock collar, and no jerks on the leash. And just say, look, these are our deal breaker points. A lot of dog walkers try to explain, hey, it's better for the anatomy. I'm sorry, I'm going to say bullshit. It releases cortisol, the stress hormone in their blood, and both these dogs have way too much cortisol. We don't want any shock collars, any choke chains, any leak jers, and no shock collars. And
that's Chris.
Oh, okay. Somebody's walking up. I thought I was going to bark, but this is yeah, he's allowed to be here. So now they hear this coming through the door. Normally this would be barking, correct?
Yes.
So they're already starting to adapt because they're starting to see the humans acting like leaders. Now we might get a little chortle, and there might be times where you will get the barking. But again, remember, good attention, bad attention is the same thing. So if they're barking, you say, shut up. Yeah. They're getting attention. So the flip side of that is what I call passive training. So passive training is rewarding the dogs when they do the things that we want voluntarily without any influence of us whatsoever. So every time the dog sits, make sure you pet under the chin and say the word sit, and only the word sit, not sit, sit. Every time they lay down, pet them and say crash. Or whatever the word is you want to do. Lay on their side, flop. If they ever lay on their back, it'll be a long time before we get that. It's a very vulnerable position. But pet them and say pancake if you want to. Come up with a dish name for feeding. Say business or deposit or potty or whatever it is when they poop. When they come in the house, you could call it mansion. So when they come in, and so you can call the backyard, jungle, or Rio, or Brazil, or whatever it is. So you come up with these funny command words that's really beneficial because the dogs can see that they're making everybody happy. So watch, you're going to get another flop here in a second. When you do, then go ahead and do that. When the dogs lick you, you can call it kisses. If I say kisses, my dog licks me. If I say love, they stop and they lick me right here. Love means lick me in the face. So and I assign it through passive training. So I'd also like you to get some bully sticks. The bully sticks that I get, these are odor-free or low odor. These are bully bites, but I would get bully sticks from a company called The Natural Dog Company. They're expensive, more expensive than the other ones, but they won't stink when your dogs are eating them, and that's really the name of the game. And when they're stressed, give them something to chew on will really be beneficial. Now, make sure that when doing this, again, this would be something I would have them in separate rooms, because Belle might not want to do it in front of Jazz, thinking Jazz is going to take it. These are also the treats that I like that they both liked once they settled down. These are called Tricky Trainers. These are soft and chewy. This is a 5-ounce bag. You can get a 15-ounce bag. The reason they work so well, they have no preservatives. If you leave the bag open, they'll be hard as M&Ms in like 10 minutes. So every time I close it, I fold the bag over, and then I zip it shut so there's no air in here. And they'll keep a long time. And I'm going to leave this bag here so you'll know what to use. But those are great treats. Even Bella, who was very nervous, was eventually, when she settled down, was eating those. So those, and I wouldn't use these in the treat and train. In the treat and train, when they're running towards that could be their portion of their meal. So feeding the dog with their kibble, if it's high enough value, would be something. And I wouldn't give them the wet food anymore until after they eat all of the dry food. Okay. And so that way it becomes like a dessert. You have to eat your, I can't have pudding if you don't eat your meat. Okay, so passive training is basically celebrating the things the dogs do that we like, so they know what they could do, and they will start emulating those behaviors, because that's the fastest way to get our attention. Now, to make sure that we're paying attention, that we're going to use the watchword of celebrate, because we're celebrating what they do. So if one of the dogs walked up to me and I missed it, somebody says, celebrate to me. Remember, we only have 3 seconds. So the dog walked up and I missed it. That was 1 second. The person saw it and said, celebrate, David. That's 2 seconds. I only have 1 second. Start petting. So don't say, what am I doing? Or just immediately start petting your dog. Even if you don't know, just start petting them. Somebody else knows. They're going to tell you and clue you in on it. And then you just say whatever. If they're sitting, pet them and say sit. If they're standing, just pet them and say come. But eventually they'll start kind of emulating those. They'll sit, come, and lay down and flop and all the rest of these things, because that's what gets the command words. Gets a reward. And I would also make a list of the official command words and use the watchword of vocabulary. Come here, vocabulary. Oh, come. It just helps us keep ourselves on check, so we're using one word rather than a whole bunch of versions of the words. Dogs don't actually speak English. The last thing, or the next thing I want to talk about is what is called petting with a purpose. So right now, Jazz is very, very aggressively nudging her guardian when she wants attention. Pet me, just shoving that nose in there. Remember, leaders tell, followers ask. So next time she nudges you, show her you are not my boss. You nudge me, I will give you a counter order telling you to sit one time and one time only. If you sit, then I pet you under your chin and say sit. If you don't sit, I got 28 other things to do. Playing hard to get works great for dating, works great for dogs too. So eventually the dog will learn, I better sit to get that attention. And if she's already sitting here, ask her to sit over here. Eventually, like I said, she'll start prepaying for it. When she does, make sure you pet her. Otherwise, she will go back to nudging you. And you can also ask them to lay down. I would not practice paw at all, because that confuses dogs. If you like this, you must really like this, and this means you belong to me. So we don't want to pet dogs that or they jump up on us, because that's the way they claim us as their property. Mm-hmm. So, and shake is it's very confusing for a lot of dogs. Number to use the watchword of paycheck. If you suspect one's petting without a purpose, you say paycheck. That person stops petting, tells the dog to sit. If the dog sits, pet him under sit and say, actually, I missed you when you flushed the toilet, I stood up and blah, blah, blah. It's a gentle reminder, not gotcha. Let me think, what else? I'm trying to think, is there anything else we want to go over that we talked about that I didn't? For the dog beds, I get the ones that are like more like a cushion, flat with just like a lip on 3 sides of it. Make sure it's white, light cream, or light gray. And I find the best place to get them is Groupon. They're cheapest. And I would get like a medium for both dogs. That way and you can get one gray and one white, so a little bit different, and try to condition the dogs just to go to their own dog bed. And if they won't go to the dog beds right next to each other, then maybe put them a little bit further apart. Put the leopard in between them. Put something to block them, and sometimes that blockage might help them start sitting, being next to each other. Eventually, it'd be nice to be able to walk the dogs together if they're both in balance. But right now, they just need some time apart. So especially Belle, I'd like her to start having some time with grandma apart. And then the dog walker, like I said, I think if you enlist the help of a dog walker for like a month or two, as long as they're positive and they're not using aversive techniques, that's really going to help. And again, you might have to go out there and start sprinkling that cheese at first to get them to do it. And eventually, maybe every yard, then every other yard, and every third yard, and then maybe just the last yard. And then dog's like sniffing a little Hoover. That's what we want. It's relaxing. They need to do that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Just text me or call me. Now this is kind of their dogs are kind of in some bad shape, so we might need to do a follow-up session. If we do, let me know. We'll I want you to take at least a month to work on this stuff. Text me or call me if you have any questions. But I want to spend at least a month working on the stuff because right now you got plenty of stuff to work on without me coming back. But if we need to, we can work on some other things as well. All right. So I am David, and actually, we're going to pan the camera. We're going to show Jazz. Can you pan the camera and show Jazz? Jazz. That's Jazz. And then see if we can put it underneath. And this is beautiful Bella girl. Look at what a sweetheart she is.
She is a sweetheart.
Bella!
Yeah,
That's Bella?
Belle.
All right.
Good
Will you come back to me?
Okay.
I'm David, and this is the Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.